Well, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's visit to Beijing caps an extraordinary year for Egypt's president. Not so long ago, he was a little-known army general, but in recent months, he's become a major force in North Africa. Here's CCTV's Kofam Ranger with more.
The inauguration of Egypt's sixth president back in June, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi won a landslide victory and did it without once holding a campaign rally. But el-Sisi has been riding a wave of popularity thanks to his role in toppling his predecessor. Just turned 60, el-Sisi spent most of his career working under former President Hosni Mubarak. Mubarak's ousting in 2011 did little to thwart his ambitions. Mubarak's successor, Mohamed Morsi, made el-Sisi his military chief and defense minister. But when popular protests demanded Morsi step aside, el-Sisi chose his country over his president and personally removed Morsi and jailed him. Months later, el-Sisi again bowed to popular pressure and ran for the presidency. In the space of a few months, el-Sisi has repaired relations with the African Union and with the West, and has proven an effective broker in the Gaza peace process. He is also seen as a valuable ally against Islamic State. Security remains el-Sisi's key challenge. Egypt suffered as part of attacks blamed on Islamist militants. On his inauguration, el-Sisi promised to stabilize Egypt and return it to prosperity. 6 months on, Egyptians are still convinced that he can. Kofam Ranger, CCTV, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, let's get more now on President el-Sisi's visit to Beijing. I'm joined here in studio by Mr. Aly Khan Satchu. Thank you very much for joining me now. In terms of economic development, what is the significance, though, of President Fattah el-Sisi's visit to China?
So, I mean, Egypt and Israel have been the pillars of the U.S. Middle Eastern foreign policy. They've been the anchors of the Pax Americana in the Middle East. So this is quite a break with that. It's signaling that Sisi is prepared to be more independent than any of his predecessors. And I think it represents a very important shift in the way Egypt is operating under the general, under the president.
Well, Egypt has traditionally been an ally of the United States. Now we're seeing President el-Sisi in Beijing. Is there a shift here for Egypt, and what has exactly informed his decision to cooperate with China? So
that there are big shifts. I think the army in particular, from where the president hails from, felt that the US let them down badly during the period of the Muslim Brotherhood. They saw it very much as an existential battle, and they felt the Americans fell on the wrong side because for a period they were supportive of Mohamed Morsi. And I think that's what's driven this foreign policy outreach with China. And I think you also seen similar moves with Russia as well. The US is playing catch up. We heard yesterday they delivered 10 Apache helicopters, I think probably trying to preempt this trip or trying to show that they were still relevant. So big changes afoot in Egypt under the president.
Well, big changes afoot in Egypt. In the past few years, though, and particularly this year, we've seen African countries strengthening their ties with China. President Jacob Zuma of South Africa recently returned from China. I mean, we saw even from Francophone Africa, President Macky Sall was there a few months back. I mean, how are you reading this whole situation now?
So I think, China's emergence in the African context is there for all of us to see, whether we look at stadiums, whether we look at roads, whether we look at our hospitals. As Africans, we can see what China's done in the last decade, and our leaders can see that as well. And also China is very, very important in terms of capital, $4 trillion of reserves. Russia yesterday had to reach out and do a swap arrangement, currency swap arrangement. Africa's no different. We're reaching out to China because we know they can be so transformative where we join together. And I think that's what informs us of this. In terms of the US is there as well. The US is obviously seeing more competition in its Africa relationship. Obama had this US-Africa summit as well. They're not sitting there with their eyes shut at this moment in time.
All right, we are seeing though now Egypt reaching out to China as well. A lot of other African countries have been reaching out to China for years now.
Yes.
Where are we seeing this relationship now in coming years? Because it was solidified this year with the visit of China's Premier Li Keqiang.
Yes, I mean the first overseas trip that Xi Jinping did was in part came to Africa. So I mean the importance of Africa on the Chinese radar is there for all to see. I think the interesting point is the US going to allow China free reign in the next 10 years in Africa? I think maybe not. The US has become much more adversarial if you look at events in Ukraine. And I think what we're seeing, whilst we're seeing a shifting of relationships, a reconfiguring, particularly in Africa's case, we have got to be aware that the US does not like a challenge. And I think China will have to keep that in mind as we move forward. And I think in part the recent sending 700 troops to Juba is showing us that China understands that it needs to develop this relationship from purely money into something more. And I think that's what that Sudanese expeditionary force is telling us as well.
All right, Mr. Aly Khan Satchu, we'll leave it there for the moment. But thank you very much for being with us here on Africa Live.